It is a wounded civilization.
Yeah. And what's happening now is, for the first time in many, many years, the civilization is in a position to correct some of the things that
Yes.
happened to it.
Yes.
This is not a particular
Yes.
case of aggression towards someone else for the reason that you are not us, hence we don't hate you, which is often the case in certain things that we associate with religious fanaticism, right? Because my way is the only way. If you are not in my way, you are a non-believer, you are an infidel. Screw you, right? This is not the approach here. Here it is. I've been damaged. I was not in a position to
Yes.
repair myself for many years. Now I am.
Yes.
So I think that's one way to look at it.
Yes.
That's important. It's important, and it is the natural tendency, not just of this civilization, but all civilizations. Which
Yes.
right. So I think
Utkarsh, I'm so glad you said it this way, and I really like the analogy. It's a process of healing. You know, those wounds which have been given to you, which have been very, very serious wounds, which have, and remember that in 1947, this whole civilizational subcontinent was also cut into two parts, now three. Two arms were cut off, it was decapitated. So the wounds are deep, and it is a healing process which is going on. I'm so glad you use that word. It's an excellent one, and I will borrow it from you. And it's been in slumber, or it's been in subjugation for a very long time, and it is now getting the strength to revive itself, getting the strength to repair itself and to heal itself. So I don't think that anyone should begrudge us that healing.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the WARC Indian History Podcast. I'm Utkarsh.
Namaskar, Sumedha.
Well, good to see all of you again. I hope you enjoyed the content of last week. I think Jyotish was one where, for me, the from to was a fair amount because I started off from a very, very skeptical place and I ended up with a much better understanding. And if you don't mind me saying, I've been pondering about it for the last week or so since we talked about it. I realized that the entire world, whether you're an analyst at a bank, whether you're a forecaster in a company making products, you are operating or you're living in the world of predictive analytics, where you're just trying to figure out what's going to happen next, right?
Exactly.
So
exactly. What is all of this? For example, GDP forecasts. They're so important. So we live in a world of predictions. You're absolutely right, and it is unfair to just brand Jyotish as superstition and the rest of it as great data science.
Yeah. That was the thing that was striking me. So I think this is the importance of what should I say? Of not
framing.
Sorry.
Framing and narrative
exactly.
setting.
Of narrative is what I wanted to say, right? Yeah. So talking about narrative, I think this is a good segue. I think there isn't much else being talked about in India, at least in these couple of weeks. I live far away,
Yes.
so I don't know much about it, but I'm guessing you're a little bit more connected with what's going on.
Yes, absolutely. And I am doing my own bit. I have given some talks on Ram Rajya, which, I can link to sometime, as in governance in the reign of Lord Ram, etc. So I have also translated the Ramayana, and I have been, I fancy myself both as somebody who is a believer and also a scholar of the Ramayana. So yes, I am very, very deeply involved. I have also been singing bhajans. So yes, you can look at me as somebody who is very much Ram Bhakt, awaiting the Ram JanmaBhumi Pran Pratishtha. Definitely.
Great. And I think this is what makes this conversation a little bit interesting, because what is going to happen is that we are going to come at it from very different places. And I think that is precisely why we were discussing this last week. I thought, and you especially advised as well, I think this is an important conversation to have. And what I'm going to do is, I'm of course not exactly the same place where you are. I have a little bit more context on the entire matter than I had, say, a year or two ago, or in general throughout my life. But I'm just going to take a couple of steps back in my journey to bring myself to where I was, say, a couple of years ago. And I'm going to ask you questions from that point of view. What you will find is that my opinion is of the self-proclaimed urban educated Indian. I'm just going to put it out there for fun, right? The ones who's very steeped in Western values and all of that, right? So I'm just putting it out there. I'm not saying that's what I think. I'm just saying that's probably what I thought 2 years ago. I'm in a slightly different place right now. But I'm going to come at it for the benefit of this conversation from that, from a very different place from where you are. And I hope through that we can shed a little bit more light into this for people from different perspectives versus me just agreeing with you or two people just kind of,
And Utkarsh, I can also put a little bit of perspective here because I was in college in the 80s, late 80s and early 90s. So that was the time just after the Rath Yatra of L.K. Advani. That was the time when the seculars of India had launched a huge propaganda wave. I was very much part of that wave. So I am, a lapsed communist, if you can call me that. So my journey itself has been very interesting. I was probably not where you were 2 years ago, but somewhere far to the left of that. And I am somewhere else today. So that journey itself has been one of finding out the truth and finding out the lies that have been spoken to us. And I think many people perhaps may find some resonance in the way I have opened up to things and understood and learned about our own past.
Absolutely. So let's do this. It's going to be a little bit of a free-flowing conversation. We'll see how this goes. So I'm going to ask 2 or 3 questions, and which are not provocative, but which are definitely, on this, or not necessarily on viewing the issue in a very positive way. And I would love for you to give your perspective on those questions. Right? So,
right.
I wasn't very much aware, I've never been following politics, particularly in India, very closely, but I had a vague idea of the Rath Yatra and all of that. And my first thought was little bit of religious fervor. Why? What is the need for this? Why do you have to be so obsessed with religion? Why is it so important? So that's kind of, for me, the starting point is, why is this thing so important that you have to go and you have to demolish a structure that's already existing over there and create something else and proclaim and, be very, very happy about it. So why does this have to happen, right? Why does this kind of religious, I'm going to use the word fanaticism, I'm using the word right now, but why does one have to behave like a religious fanatic? That's my starting point. This is the first question. The second one, which I'm going to preempt you a little bit, and I think it's going to link it to the answer to the first question, is it is important to view this story of Ayodhya and that particular area not starting in 1988 or whenever the Rath Yatra was, but going beyond in time, going backwards in time. And it is also to put what's happening over there in context with what happens and what has happened generally in human history and in other civilizations, etc. So if you could give me some of that, this is kind of where I have been learning a little bit about, but I would love to know more about it as well. Spoiler alert, I mean, one of the most interesting places I've seen is, of course, the Hagia Sophia in Istanbul, formerly Constantinople. So I think you can guess, the audience can guess where I'm going with the question.
I have never been there. So perhaps, you can, when we talk about it, you can give me something of a description. I know it through reading about it. I've never been to Constantinople.
But you live in Europe, you should,
Istanbul.
I know, you should go. It's so close by, relatively speaking, compared to where I am.
I've been to the airport a number of times, but I've never really gone to the city itself. So you can give us a little bit of the description of what it feels like today. When did you go? Before its conversion into a mosque or after?
It has been 2015, so 9 years. But I do have it's one of those things later, at that time I wasn't that steeped into particularly European history, so I didn't know too much about it. I just remember the place leaving quite an impression on me. And then later, of course, I read everything and so on and so forth. But just going back, so starting off with what justifies people behaving like religious fanatics in the case of Ram Mandir?
Utkarsh, I really don't know how to answer this, because if you are somebody who is completely divorced from the culture, civilization, tradition, beliefs of the people who live in India, then I don't even know how you can begin to understand this. The importance of the Ramayana, the importance of Sri Ram. You know, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, these are called the Itihas of Bharatvarsh. They are the two pillars on which Indic civilization rests. If you go to any part of the country, there will be some connection with either the Ramayana or the Mahabharata. So these are the two unifiers of a very huge, spread out and different a civilization which has many different elements. So first you will have to, or whoever is this urban, secular, educated individual, will have to step out of their own limitations, and they will have to put themselves into the boots of, or the chappals of, people who are believers.
Yeah.
And that
just to point on
constitutes-
that, right? Because I think it's an important one. If you take a very, very materialistic, not materialistic as in you want more things, but in terms of your view of the universe.
If you take a Hegelian or
Hegelian
Marxian
view. I'm
view,
not a
okay,
philosophy
yes.
student, so I don't know the terminology, but I'll go with that. Then it's almost as if that, hey, I can see everything for what it is, which is just atoms and whatever else, quarks or whatever it might be. Everybody else who believes in something else which they cannot verify through scientific observation is a fool. Very extreme way of putting it. But what I'm trying to say is, if you think that way, I don't think that way. If someone thinks that way, you have to recognize that the way that you're thinking is not the way other people think, is not the way the majority of people in any particular part of the world think. So you have to give the ability or the understanding that people can believe in something which they cannot verify, and that is bigger than them, that is it. And if you don't believe in that, it's okay, it's up to you. It's absolutely, but you cannot say that somebody else who does that, they are whatever, they are stupid or they are backward or they're not modern. So that's the starting point. I think giving people the ability or being in a place where you can agree that other people have the right to think that there's something bigger than them beyond just the material universe, start there. That might make things a lot easier for you to then understand where people are coming from.
That's a very useful thing to say, Utkarsh, because sometimes people are not able to come out of the cages in which they have put themselves. So, this materialism, this Western universalism, the idea that there is only one way in which you can approach the world, it's very much a product of post-Enlightenment, 19th and 20th century Western intellectual thinkers. Marx is a big one for materialism. Then there is also someone called Max Weber. Max Weber believes, or he says, that Western civilization has reached the apogee of human endeavor, and in the end everyone has to become like them. So that is the source of this Western universalism. That is a source of thinking that there is only one way of approaching the world. There isn't, and you've said it very well right now, that for people who do believe in a certain way of approaching the world, the materialistic or the scientific way or whatever it is, need to know that there are other people out there who approach the world in a different way, and they are not wrong or right, because there are no wrongs or rights over here, really speaking. It is just the way people want to live their lives. Now in India, the way people want to live their lives is according to what we call Sanatan Dharma. That is the way they have been living their lives for thousands of years. And this Johnny come lately, which is called Hegelian materialism or Marxism or whatever, post modernism or deconstruction, all that is not going to make a difference to something which has very strong roots. Those strong roots are what I was telling you about. The whole the way of life is constructed around the lives of the heroes and the people and the events and the stories which are there in the Mahabharata and the Ramayana. So Sri Ram is Maryada Purushottam. What does that mean? He is the perfect man. He is the perfect person who came down on earth and lived a life full of trials and tribulations, but never let go of his dharma. So again, dharma is not religion. Dharma, I think we have discussed it once. It's more like, it's a universal law. Dharma is the way that the entire cosmos, society, people live. There are different kinds of dharma, and all that is well delineated in Indian philosophical thought. So Sri Ram is seen as an embodiment of that. Then it's natural that the place where Sri Ram was born is going to be very, very, very important for those who believe in him, for Hindus, and that constitutes even today about 80% of the population. Utkarsh, this urban, educated, secular group of people, how big are they? Minuscule. But they control a lot of the narrative. They controlled all of it for a very long time. And it's been, I would say, even today it's a work in progress. For grassroots people to really have their say and to make those things important which are important in their scheme of things and not in the English educated elite scheme of things, that's still a work in progress. Although, well, nowadays the English educated elite are not as powerful as they were, they still are. Let's not make the mistake of thinking that their power is gone. It's become less, but it's not completely gone as yet.
Nor necessarily, so I think, are all of the English educated elite, if we use this term, completely divorced from their culture as well, right? Not everybody is a self-hating wannabe devotee of the Western. Some are.
I wish I could be very optimistic about that, but as a product of that self-hating English elite, let me tell you that I would say at least 80%, 75% are like that. But the good news is, Utkarsh, that people are changing. People are getting some kind of self-awareness and self-realization. I told you, I am a lapsed communist. So I have gone through this phase. I have gone through this phase myself. I had the advantage of a very strong and rooted family, both my natal family as well as the family I married into. And the family I married into was very, very far from this educated English elite. Even though my husband checks all the boxes of IIT and IIM and civil services, he has studied in a Hindi medium school. And my father-in-law used to actually be a Katha Vachak, which means that he used to tell the story of the Ramcharitmanas across the villages around where he lived to earn some money when he was young. So he was an expert on it, and I remember, I think of myself as a scholar of the Ramayana, and I would have some discussion with him, and he would very easily correct me about something, and I would go back and frantically turn pages and see that he was right. So there is something which is inherent to people. It is difficult for the urban educated perhaps to realize this, but it runs in the veins. It runs in the blood of people. The stories from the Ramayana, Mahabharata, the stories from Itihas, it is part of life. So when the importance is such, the question that you posed, your first question, part of me doesn't understand that question at all. Because it seems to me to be very natural that if something is so important, if something is so visceral, if something is so basic, so fundamental, so important, then how is it that for 500 years, people were doing nothing, or actually they were not doing nothing? How is it that they could accept this kind of desecration of a sacred Hindu site for 500 years? That, according to me, is the question. not the one you asked. Because to belittle the importance of the basic structure of the country with which the Ramayana is intertwined is something which will not work. It has been tried for decades. It does not work. It's something which is against the very ethos of this country. So it's not going to work, and believe me, I mean, they tried. There is a black roll call of historians, eminent historians as they've been called. They are stains on the academia of this country because they have lied, they have made up things, they have misstated to the courts of this land, and they have been pulled up for it. So to give it the label of words like religious fanaticism is wrong. Because this religious fanaticism is just something which is imported from a lot of the Christian-Muslim conflict. It comes from a completely different kind of ethos, completely different kind of situation, fight. For one, we don't have a religion, because religion is just all about rules. Here it is dharma, it is Sanatan dharma. It's not a set of rules, but you can think of it as a way of living, a way of life. There are some rules in it, but they are not prescriptive. Then again, fanaticism. What is fanaticism? I'd like you to define that for me before I go on.
I think the common definition of it would be people doing irrational, sometimes harmful things in the name of a creator that they cannot see and cannot verify exists. I'm just putting it in this manner.
Oh my God. And what is the, why is it important to be rational?
That's the construct by which...
Utkarsh, rationality again. I wish I could give you, I must give you a primer on Max Weber. So he was the one who described the birth of rationality post-enlightenment, and the box that Western civilization defines itself as. It has to be rational, material, things that you can see, things that you can control, and everything has to be a system, which if it's a numerical system, even better. So who says that all these things are good? Who told you this, and why do you say this? And a creator who you can't see, a creator who you can't see. Utkarsh, there are so many things that you can't see. So are you going to say that whatever you cannot see and touch?
Well, let me go ahead. You can verify. You may not be able to see the molecules, but you can verify that they exist. You can verify electricity.
And that verification is according to a process that you yourself have set up.
Yes.
And very often that verification is not 100%, but it's a percentage which is acceptable as
but some things are 100%, right?
Standard.
The laws of thermodynamics work. The laws of aerodynamics work. The Bernoulli's principle
when
works,
you are
hence
there,
the plane flies.
When you are there at the simpler level, it's easy to make these things work. The more systems become complex, and I'm not saying complicated, but complex. The more complex systems become, the more difficult it is to understand everything in a rational way. However, the point I'm trying to make here, the larger point, is a philosophical, and it's the one, it's the approach. We have been taught science, rationality is the holy grail. It is the universal way of thinking, and that's where we must reach. If in the hard sciences all atoms and molecules behave in the same way no matter which country they are in, then in the realm of society, in the realm of culture also, everyone must behave according to the same laws no matter where they live. And those laws were set up by post-enlightenment European scholars who very strongly believed that all these heathens and pagans and backward people are slowly going to come to their senses, reach that apogee of science and rational thinking, and become like us. Now, I beg to differ, and many millions of people beg to differ. We should have a special, a separate podcast on, this rationality and creator, etc., etc. But right now, I think let us return to what we were talking about. So you see, to try to put the devout Hindu in a Weberian or Marxian or Foucaultian box was never going to work. It worked for a few decades, but even then it was tough going for those people who were trying to push this down the throats of the Hindus, and it was what can I say? It was a fight which started as soon as Babur raised the temple at the Ram JanmaBhumi and put up this masjid. So think of it. Would any Muslim accept a church at Mecca or a mandir at Mecca? Do we go and build a temple at Jerusalem? No, we don't. So to denigrate the importance of the site of the birth of Ram was one of the tools used by, of course, the Islamic invasion, and later, much later now, it was also used by the infamous Babri Masjid Action Committee, full of academics like Irfan Habib, Romila Thapar, D.N. Jha, R.S. Sharma. This is a roll call of infamy. This is a roll call of people who are stains on academia, as I have repeated, and it cannot be repeated enough. They have not been in any way penalized for their actions, which they should be, but anyway, they are all very old now. So
what exactly is their action, just for my understanding as well?
Okay, yeah. So if we go back a bit if we go back 500 years into when this problem started. So this problem started when Babur invaded India, and he whenever he went to those sites which were important for Hindus, he razed those temples and built a mosque over there. This was done as the action of a Muslim conqueror to not only tell the natives that their day was over, but to in effect show the conquest of Islam, the glory of Islam, and the superiority of Islam. Let's take, I'm going to give you 3-4 examples. So when there are mosques built at 2-3 very important places, and I'm not going to give you the obvious examples. I'm going to give you slightly different examples. One, of course, is the Babri Masjid, which he went and built exactly where Lord Ram was supposed to be born. There was a 10th century temple over there, which was probably razed down by the Turks. It was built again in the 12th century by the Gadawalas. That was the one which was broken down in the 15th century by Babur. Now he built a masjid over there, and then he just left it. So till 300 years after the masjid was built, it was not used for anything. It was a kind of empty building. There was no namaz over there. There was no worship of Muslims over there. It was meant simply as a symbol of victory. Whereas Hindus never stopped worshipping over there. They could not go inside the masjid where the Janmsthan was. So just outside, they built a Ram Chabutra. They built a cradle for the baby Ram. And descriptions of all these things are found in the records of travelers, in the records of the British, in the records of the biography of Babur and his various other biographers, in also the revenue records of the Mughals, the revenue records of the British. Now these are all extremely tedious, fact by fact. So I'm going to show you 2 books.
Mm-hmm.
This is called The Battle for Ram by Meenakshi Jain.
By the way, is it pointing at the camera?
She is the historian.
Just logistic check. Yes.
Okay. So this is one book. So Meenakshi Jain is one of the people who ought to be felicitated. She has been given a Padma Shri. She deserves more for being the historian who has worked away at this indefatigably. Now this is the other book. Can you see it?
You'll have to show me separately on the Zoom camera, but show that to me. Ram and Ayodhya.
Yes.
By the way, the name sounds familiar. Didn't you mention a book about in our first podcast, Sati, the second podcast?
Yeah,
Was it her?
Meenakshi Jain is a great historian.
Okay,
Yes,
okay. So
exactly.
So I have cool.
So this book was written in 2000 and what is it? What is the date of this book? This book was written in 2013. And this book was written, the other one which I showed you, The Battle for Ram. This was written in 2017. And you should hear in her words how much trouble she had in getting these published. So in the early 2000s when she tried to get this published, and the publishers said, fine, the research is good, everything is good, but you've written that there should be a temple there. Remember, the Supreme Court judgment had not come then, so it was a live case. If you had said that there should be a masjid over there, then we would have published this book, otherwise we can't. So you see, there is a stranglehold of the narrative by people who don't want the truth to come out, which is how, in spite of, like I told you, proof from travelers' accounts, from revenue records, from archaeological digs, from texts, everything was there. So it was kind of almost like an open and shut case. And also, it is not fair to blame the average Muslim for this. The average Muslim is not to blame for this, because in Ayodhya, the average Muslim was very much ready to give up that masjid because it was not important for them anyway. They had never been used for worship. And they understood the importance of this site to the Hindus. But who stepped in? The Babri Masjid Action Committee, which is why I have so many black marks to describe against them. And they spoke to the litigants who were going to, give up this case and say, all right, the Hindus can build a temple, and said, we will make you win. We have the proof. And this Babri Masjid Action Committee is fully responsible for the kind of bad blood that was generated. Now that bad blood has subsided, and today it's interesting to see that the Muslims of India, the Muslims of Ayodhya are very much they very much accepted this verdict, except for a few people who keep saying things for votes. That's always going to happen in India. But Iqbal Ansari, original litigant of this case, he has been invited to the consecration ceremony, and he is also, when the Prime Minister had gone last week, he was the first one to shower flowers on the Prime Minister and welcome him for the consecration. So this is a question of a lot of very bad politicking, and the kind of impression you have, which you have or you said that some people have, that this is religious fanaticism and this is just religious fervor gone mad. That is a kind of impression which is created by these academics through lies, by the media through manipulation.
Could you
the Hindus have never
run through because there's a lot in there which even I don't know about, like the Supreme. Again, I'm just expressing my ignorance here, but also knowing that a lot of people, especially those outside India, those not that connected, would have some level of ignorance like I do. So the sequence of events. So in Babur's time, before Babur's time, there was a temple. He broke it, created a masjid. That masjid stayed there for a few hundred years. Right? Temple must have been there before that for, I don't know, time immemorial, whatever, a few thousand years.
Yeah, time immemorial, yes. We don't know. The last one we know about is the one which was broken in the 10th century, because certain inscriptions have been found.
Okay. So,
and then it was rebuilt and in the 12th century and broken again by Babur. And after that, that structure which was called the Babri Masjid, that stayed there for 200-300 years, but the Hindus never gave up their worship of the site. And there are umpteen descriptions of Ram Navami celebrations, of worship over there, of the common average person coming to pray over there. And the Hindus kept on then applying to the British courts to get their rights in the Ram JanmaBhumi. But the British, some of them have wrote very sympathetic orders that yes, we do want to give you your rights, but you see it's a very sensitive matter and we can't do that. Then there was a very interesting thing that happened in 1949 which is called Ram Lala Ka Prakat Hona. So in 1949, a small murti of Ram Lala. Ram Lala means baby Ram.
Okay.
Appeared in the temple. So many people say that it was a divine thing that happened. Others say that somebody placed that little idol of Ram Lalla over there. So Jawaharlal Nehru's government was very unhappy and they said, oh, you just throw it out. But the deputy magistrate over there, one Mr. R.K. Nair, he refused to do that. He said, I just can't. I cannot find anyone here who will be willing to pick it up and throw it away anywhere. So we can't do it. So that remained. And then there was a court case. The court case went through a lot of ups and downs and delays, etc., etc. But finally, the Supreme Court gave its decision. I think, what was it? In 2018, I think. I am also not very clear about the date.
So 1949 to Rath Yatra in the late 80s, then the Supreme Court. So what's happening? What has been happening? What were the set of events or reasons leading? I mean, I got the historical context of the site, but what specifically led to the Rath Yatra, and what happened since the Rath Yatra till the Supreme Court judgment, and from then till today?
No. So the Rath Yatra was because this issue had been around. Just give me a minute while I look for the date of the final judgment.
Okay.
Yes, it was 2019.
19?
It was 2019, yes.
Oh, wow, okay.
2019.
Okay. So what was happening from 1949 till Rath Yatra? What was going on? What was the...
Okay, so 1949 till the Rath Yatra, there is a Ram Chabutra over there. Then there was in 1940, Ram Chabutra and worship is going on, like I told you. People come and go over there on Ram Navami. There's special puja.
And what about the masjid? Is it being used as a masjid at that point in time?
It was in 1848 that for the first time there was an application from the Muslim side regarding worship over there till 1848, which is why I said that for 300 years there is not a sign of any worship at that place. But in 1848 there is an application that there is this masjid, and by 1848 remember it was 1858 actually, after the Great Revolt.
Okay.
It was 1858. So then is the first time that one sees that a push is being made that Muslims want to worship over there. But even then, there was only a Friday prayer, that's all. It was not a normal place of worship. It was kept closed. There was a Friday prayer and then it was closed again. In the meanwhile, the Ram Chabutra next to it, and there was a set of Mahants who would sit there and who were not letting go of that place. They did not have anything pakka. They did not have any protection at all from the elements, but they did not let go of the place. So the point over here is that Hindus never ever let go of the place. So it's not a question of suddenly becoming very full of religious fervor and saying, now I want this back. They never let go, ever. And no matter what, so those Mahants had to sit there in the heat, cold, rain, whatever. They were not allowed to put up any protection, but they still did not leave. In 1949, when the Ram Lalla idol appeared, a small little tent was made on top of that Ram Lalla. And the worship of Ram Lalla went on under that tent. And this Friday prayers at Babri Masjid, that also went on. In the 80s, the Bharatiya Janata Party put it in its manifesto that we will build the Ram temple at Ram JanmaBhumi. And to create a momentum, that was a political thing. To create a momentum, then L.K. Advani started his Yatra from Somnath to Ayodhya. Why Somnath?
Somnath's been destroyed so many times, right? It's another example.
And rebuilt.
Destroyed and rebuilt. Yes.
It was rebuilt by Indians in 1950. Rajendra Prasad went for the Pran Pratishtha. Jawaharlal Nehru was furious and tried to command him not to go and tried to command everyone not to go, but it didn't work. So it is a
And the more I
symbol
look at
of,
it, a lot of this this comes from Nehru, this whole attitude.
oh my God, don't ask, don't start.
Maybe that needs to be another episode.
Yeah, we should have an episode on
original
Nehru.
Western-loving, self-hating Indian.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Who used to get all his clothes dry cleaned from Brooks Brothers or something, some nonsense.
Oh yeah,
like that.
it's
But
a
anyway.
famous set of. I think I've seen there's a
Yeah,
shop in.
yes.
Yeah. Anyways, yes, I've heard of them.
Yes. So where were we? So in in the 80s, that Rath Yatra, that was something which was unprecedented in terms of the kinds of emotions that arose on both sides of the spectrum. Both the Muslim side, that is the masjid side, and the mandir side, emotions were very high. There was a lot of violence. In fact, there was shooting down of car sevaks by the Mulayam Singh government. In 1991, there was firing on the car sevaks are those who said that we want to give the labor of our hands to build the temple, and they would all go to Ayodhya and they would carry bricks to build the temple, Ram bricks. So Mulayam Singh was dependent on Muslim votes, so he was completely anti-Hindu. So he would repel them violently, and there was a fatal shooting. I mean, dozens of people were killed in October 1991. There were also private Muslim militias which were allowed to attack these car sevaks, and it is a shameful chapter in the history of the UP government. But in 1992, tensions were very high, and both sides were very, very, they were ready to do whatever they wanted. The Muslim side wanted to save that, because by that time, the earlier acceptance of the Muslims of Ayodhya that yes, this is a site important for Hindus, so we should give it to them. It's not at all important for us, but it will be a gesture of, accommodation and general harmony to give it. That had been finished by the Babri Masjid Action Committee, by the Communist Party, by the Samajwadi Party, by the Congress Party, who had all ranged themselves on the side of the Muslims. And obviously there were a lot of these, let's call it in a shortcut, urban educated.
The way you said it, I don't really call it on the side of the Muslims. It's on the side of retaining the masjid over there.
The masjid side.
Yes.
Let's put it that way. Yeah, shortcut is masjid side. Yeah.
Using
but by that time, Utkarsh, because that is something I have lived through, emotions were really high. And at that point of time, yes, it had become the Muslim side versus the Hindu side.
Okay.
And like I said, the earlier acceptance had completely gone away.
Excuse me.
So it was the masjid or nothing. It was like that. And for the mandir side, it was the mandir. But since the prevailing atmosphere was pro-masjid, the then Chief Minister of UP, Kalyan Singh, he had to give an undertaking that he will not let the Babri Masjid, anything happen to that structure. Because at that time there were many slogans. One of them was "Ek dhakka aur do, Babri Masjid tod do," or "Mandir wahi banayenge." This "Mandir wahi banayenge" has still retained its importance. Till about 2-3 years ago, the Congress used to taunt the BJP, "Mandir wahi banayenge, tareekh nahi batayenge." That you are saying you will build the temple has not come up, and you're not going to tell me the date. So, these things were, again, emotions used to run very high. And there were fierce partisans on both sides. At the time, the media and the narrative was in the control mostly of the Communist Party and of these self-hating elites. So the stories which went on was that, wow, look at this is a mosque and Hindus are just attacking the mosque. Completely forgetting the past history of that site, the fact that it had been broken down simply to show the Islamic conquest of Bharat. So it was like, driving a stake through the heart of Bharat. What were the other places where they made mosques? One was Kashi, the center of Shiva worship. The other was Mathura, the place where Krishna was born. And another one, which we don't talk about so much. This is a place in Uttar Pradesh called Sambhal. There was a Hari Mandir in Sambhal. Why was that broken down and a mosque built there? Because according to Hindu tradition, the next avatar, the 10th avatar, Kalki, is going to appear in Sambhal. So to stop that from happening, even that was broken down and a mosque was built on top of it. So let's not kid ourselves, Utkarsh. This was all about Islamic conquest. And this was Islamic conquest driving a stake through the heart of Hindu Bharat.
Yeah,
to demoralize
500 years
the
ago when
Hindus.
it happened, right? All of this.
Yes, yeah. So to demoralize the Hindus. Now, if you ever go to Kashi and look at the mosque over there, they did not break the temple completely. They just broke down the shikhar and the top. So everything is like a temple. There are murtis, there are carvings, there are Hindu religious symbols, and on top of that is a mosque. So why was that done? To remind the Hindus of the conquest by the Muslims. So anything, all this wishy-washy stuff, you have somebody like Richard Eaton, or you have, of course, today's very rabid Christian evangelical historians, Audrey Trusch, the types of Audrey Trusch, who say that it was, just a few temples were broken and there was nothing religious about it. It was just done as part of politics. So we should not take it as any kind of religious angle in this. This is just trying to, whitewash the situation. The situation was that the Islamic conquest of India had to be shown. The Hindus were in a very poor position. They had no political power. They had no money. But they never gave up on their sites. This site of Ram JanmaBhumi, or say the site of Somnath, or any other site, when the big temples would be broken, after that Hindus had no political power, no money. What would they do? They would build some very small thing and worship over there. They had no power, but they did not give up on their devotion. So, this is an amazing story of people who did not give up in spite of all civilizational forces being against them. Let me give you 2 or 3 examples of memory and give you a insight into the problems with historiography as we practice it today. So Indians are accused of not having any historical sense. They don't believe in history. But what are the ways in which there is evidence of this is given? So they'll say, no, there is no text and this is not annotated, this is not written, and we could not find remains of this, etc. Of course, the problem with texts is that we are an oral civilization and texts are there, but the heart of the Indic civilization is oral. So depending only on text is ab initio wrong. Anybody who knows that it's an oral civilization knows that this approach is wrong. However, even if you look at texts, people don't know the language, they don't know how to read it, they don't know how to date it, but they still go on reading those texts and getting wrong messages out of it. Archaeological remains, we are a very heavily populated country. It's not possible to dig up every place. And then of course, given the weather and climate conditions, things don't survive. This is again a topic I'd like to take up, Utkarsh. I'm just giving you a very short entry into this. So if you look at a civilization like India, Bharat, it is the only civilization which dates back to the Bronze Age. It is the oldest civilization, oldest living continuous civilization on planet Earth. So this, to understand, it's living, it's not dead. It's very easy to go, comparatively easy to go dig up the tombs of the pharaohs in Egypt. They're all dead. They cannot protest. You can do what you like. We are not a dead body. So you cannot do a post-mortem on us. The methods of history are the methods of post-mortem. We are a living civilization. We need different methods. We need to look at sources of evidence which have not been seen before. I'll give you an example pertaining to Ram JanmaBhumi. Now, for Ram JanmaBhumi, there have been fights, attacks by Hindu groups to break the mosque. Even before 1992, there have been such attacks in the 19th century. So, a group of such people attacked the mosque and managed to break one wall, but they could not manage to break the whole thing. So, the British came in and they penalized the Hindus who had attacked the mosque, and they asked them to pay 85,000 rupees, okay, in the 19th century. So those families paid that 85,000 rupees, and it completely wiped them out. They are completely poverty stricken. Now, if you want, you can read last week's interview of the descendants of those families who still remember all those events and the fact that they were pushed into poverty by that. There is another group of people who had decided that till the Ram Mandir is built, because they had lost the Ram Mandir after attacking it and then they lost, they had said that they will not wear any footwear or any headwear. And they have kept that oath till today. It is only now that they are wearing headwear and footwear. So, these are living memories. That's why I say that post-mortem methods of historiography are not very useful. You can use it, but they have to be supplemented by a lot of other things. So, it is also, a little surprising to me that it has become such a kind of it became a very international issue. That look at what these people are doing and they're trying to break down a mosque, etc. So, this is not something which is unprecedented.
Yeah. I think, I think for anyone examining it without much knowledge or looking at it from an external point of view, I think there are 3 or 4 points to bear. The first point to take note of is forget every civilization, forget about thinking of the world in terms of civilizations. Even if you're thinking in anybody, even if you're the most hardcore postmodernist or whatever, you differentiate human beings into people of your family and people who are not in your family. You will behave and you will have certain things that are you'll behave in a very different way with your family, right? Versus someone else, right? If somebody in your family is starving, you will go and feed them. But millions of people are starving every day, you're not going to feed them. I'm giving a very stupid example.
Yeah.
But the point is that there are different approaches. There is a commonality. And civilization is one of those structures that humans use to make sense of themselves, right? So given that you accept that a civilization, you are a civilization, your country, whatever you accept, everything has certain symbolic things. Everything, there are a lot of symbols, and not symbols like the symbol, but things are of symbolic importance to your civilization. So the point over here is, here you have the case of a civilization which had a lot of, cruel things done to them 500 years ago behind whatever motivation.
So that's why V.S. Naipaul has written The Wounded Civilization.
Okay.
It is a wounded civilization.
Yeah. And what's happening now is, for the first time in many, many years, the civilization is in a position to correct some of the things that happened to it.
Yes.
This is not a particular case of aggression towards someone else for the reason that you are not us, hence we don't hate you, which is often the case in certain things that we associate with religious fanaticism, right? Because my way is the only way. If you are not in my way, you are a non-believer, you are an infidel, screw you, right? This is not the approach here. Here it is, I've been damaged. I was not in a position to repair myself for many years. Now I am.
Yes.
So I think that's one way to look at it. That's important. It's important, and it is the natural tendency, not just of this civilization, but all civilizations. Which right. So I think
Utkarsh, I'm so glad you said it this way, and I really like the analogy. It's a process of healing. Those wounds which have been given to you, which have been very, very serious wounds, and remember that in 1947, this whole civilizational subcontinent was also cut into 2 parts, now 3. 2 arms were cut off, it was decapitated. So the wounds are deep, and it is a healing process which is going on. I'm so glad you use that word. It's an excellent one, and I will borrow it from you. And it's been in slumber, or it's been in subjugation for a very long time, and it is now getting the strength to revive itself, getting the strength to repair itself and to heal itself. So I don't think that anyone should begrudge us that healing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess that is why it's important for people who have. See, again, words are so important, right? The moment you would use the word religion, to most people, it connotes a completely different way, right? It's like it's a form of thinking that divides the world into people who are like me and other people who need to think like me, otherwise they are mistaken. That is the assumption religion. That's
but can I just interject over here, Utkarsh? You are talking in a very, very Abrahamic kind of way. That's not the way Hindu Dharma thinks at all.
No, I agree with you.
This exclusivity is a characteristic of the Abrahamic religions, who believe that there is one God.
Exactly.
And only its believers are my brothers and sisters, and others can go hang. The concept of kafir. Islam has the concept of kafir. So others can go hang, it's only my fellow co-religionists. But that's the Abrahamic religions, that's Christianity, that's Islam, that's Judaism. And they are completely different from Sanatan Dharma, which just does not have this idea of exclusivity. It has an idea of inclusivity.
Yeah.
And Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which has become one of the leitmotifs of modern India today, that the whole world is my family. So we don't have this idea, Utkarsh. What you're saying is coming from your education or your standpoint as somebody absolutely, brought up in the Abrahamic system, even though he may not be a Christian or a Muslim.
Yeah, I'm putting it in this way to help the casual observer or someone who is not, because for me, a lot of my interactions, I would say most of my interactions are with people who are not Indian or of Indian origin. And often what I try to do is if there's a certain question, right, there's so many questions, right, people, especially nowadays, people are even more and more curious about India. So which is why I think putting it in a framing, and not to say that this is the correct framing, but this is, for better or worse, at this point of time in 2024, I'm using words like in a cosmopolitan city like where I stay in, this is the framework which people can use to understand. And then it is important for them to understand that if you think of this, there's religious fanaticism.
I will also then say something else over here, because I was just listening to an interview of eminent intellectuals from the United States. I don't want to take his name. But for him, Hindu supremacy is like white supremacy in the US.
Exactly. This is
absolute rubbish. Absolute rubbish. Hindus are not the whites of anywhere. The whites have been or were in they had political power, they had prosperity, they had economic power for centuries. It's exactly the opposite with Hindus.
Yeah, that actually reminds me of something.
For the past 1,000 years, they have been second-class citizens.
That actually reminds me of something. So I do like this guy and his podcast, because he does do he brings a lot of useful guests who open up, at least my mind, so many different things, which is Ranveer from Beer Biceps. But the one thing that he says which really irritates me, and I wish that somebody talks to him, whenever he brings it up next, somebody talks to him, is he keeps saying, I'm a Hindu male, so I'm like a white male of India. I'm like, dude, no.
Yeah, absolutely
no,
wrong. What utter rubbish.
So, no, I think, I think he's a very, very open to think, but I think he just needs to be corrected a little bit and get some better information. There is no parallel here. This is not transplanting one concept from here to another.
No.
So anyways, it just struck me that when you mentioned that Hindu supremacy.
Yeah,
it was really funny.
And academics in India have this very horrible habit of, importing things. We've spoken of trying to import the critical race theory, wherein they make the Brahmins into the whites. So all this is ignoring the fact that for 1,000 years, Hindus have been second-class citizens, and literally so, because they were, jizya was imposed on them because of their religion. And also, if there was a Hindu peasant and there was a Muslim peasant, the taxes that were taken from the Hindu peasant were more for agricultural produce than from the Muslim peasant. So there was a systematic, impoverishment of Hindus in this subcontinent for 1,000 years, with few pockets of some flowering, such as Shivaji Maharaj or Vijayanagar. We must deal with these also sometime. These are also very fascinating, but very sad. The sacking of Vijayanagar is one of the saddest things in the entire world.
Those are
I
the
cannot
ruins at
bring
Hampi,
myself
right?
to go to
Today.
Hampi.
Yeah.
I cannot bring myself to go there because it's just emotionally too terrible for me.
Yeah. Okay, I think this has been very, very. I think I'm glad.
The one thing that I wanted to also talk about before we end is the fact that I just said something, that the world should not begrudge us this healing, and the world should not begrudge us putting up our symbols again. So I just want to give a couple of examples. I don't know whether you were going to talk about that later, so I thought I would jump in.
Yes, please.
Regarding places and situations where this has been done. So in the Iberian Peninsula, in the 8th century, about 711 to 720, the Umayyad Caliphate overcame the Visigoths, and they established Al-Andalus over there. So this is the Iberian Peninsula, Portugal and Spain. A few years after that, the Christian fight back began. And there was, some of them fought singly, then they came together and fought. Then finally they asked the Pope to put all the Christian forces into one big battering ram so that they could finish off this caliphate. So they managed to do it in 1492. And then they established Christian rule in the Iberian Peninsula again. So what did they do? All the mosques which had been made by this Umayyad Caliphate were turned into cathedrals. The most important one, two of the most important ones, one was the siege of Cordoba, and the other one was Granada. So let me talk about Cordoba, because there is a huge, big mosque which was turned into a cathedral by Ferdinand III, 1292. So what did he do when he conquered that place? He broke down that mosque, imported Christian people to live over there, but they were not enough. So he made a lot of the Muslims come back and gave them low-level jobs to make the, gave them not low-level, artisanal jobs, to rebuild that cathedral, that mosque into a cathedral. And this was done perforce, obviously. They didn't want to do it. And that place was consecrated into a Christian sacred space again by the first bishop of Cordoba. There were 7 steps set down for this. Hanging crosses on the walls, removing all the corpses that were not Christian, making a mixture of, I think it was salt and lime and something, and writing in Greek characters and Latin characters over there. So that was sacralizing the place. I've given you a detailed description of Cordoba. There are dozens and dozens of mosques, all turned into cathedrals. So this was what? They were reclaiming the place for themselves. And it also strikes me, not just the Hagia Sophia, which is of course another great example of a cathedral turning into a mosque, but I was thinking about Notre Dame, the cathedral in France. So you remember a few years ago it burnt down. And when it burnt down, all that self-hating elite class of India, they cried buckets of tears that we cannot bear to see these ruins, this thing of beauty destroyed. So I was wondering to myself, couldn't they look around India and see so many of these ruins? No tears for those ruins? There is a level of hypocrisy and double standards here, which I think comes from that, hatred of Hindus as pagans, which was there in the Christian colonizers and the Islamic conquerors, and which has somehow been integrated into their own worldview by a lot of the self-hating elite of India.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think again the good news is attitudes are changing. It takes time. At least now people are in a position where they're free from the shackles of intellectual. I mean, there was actual slavery or fiefdom, and now intellectual slavery and fiefdom also continues, but it's slowly losing its edge.
Yeah, yeah. And you have to, anybody who is Indian has to realize that Sri Ram is he is a god, but he's not just anybody. He is also a symbol of, an expression of what is best in the Indian civilizational ethos. You know that, or maybe you would not know, that there is a list of 16 kings of this land which has come to us since God alone knows when, thousands of years. In those 16 kings, there are some kings who are before Sri Ram, there are some kings who are after Sri Ram. Say Yudhishthir, he is after Sri Ram. And there's a lot of the Ramayana and the Mahabharata also, and Yudhishthir is also told to establish Ram Rajya when he becomes the king of the subcontinent. So, in this list of 16 ideal kings of India, of Bharat, Sri Ram is special. He is special because it is a kind of 360-degree governance, 360-degree focus on ethics, on society, on culture, on a kind of, ideal life from all facets. That's why it's called Ram Rajya. It is the ideal way of living, the ideal way of governing, and he is seen as the embodiment of all that is best in the Indian civilizational ethos. So the coming up of this Ram JanmaBhumi marks a revival of and a confidence of Hindus in themselves, which they had completely lost. It still hasn't come back, but I think it is marking a strong revival because I can see a lot of young people have also become, aware of so many things that they were not aware of earlier. So may this process continue and may it be hastened as far as I'm concerned.
Yep. Wonderful. So on that note, should we end it here?
Yes. And next week, of course, is going to be the Ram JanmaBhumi Pran Pratishtha. So I hope that this talk of ours is a little topical and will help people who want to understand what is happening in India. And after our next podcast, we will come back to some less, heavily weighted topic. Something perhaps lighter. This is something with great depth, with great resonance, with great importance for Bharatvarsh. Maybe we can do something which is a little lighter next time. There's always a lot to cover, and we got so many interesting suggestions last time, Utkarsh. At the end of, after our Jyotish podcast, and there are some people who want more on the same subject.
Yeah, and that list is growing longer. That we have a list of topics that's growing longer and longer.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Then see you folks next time. Take care.
Yes. Namaskar. Jai Shri Ram.